All right, y'all, it's 11:01 a.m. and we're supposed to start at 11, so I think I'm just going to roll right into this. My name's Adam Fletcher, and today I'm here to present on learning democracy skills. But before we get going, I just want to say really quick, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate your time and energy and commitment to this conference and to everything that you're learning. I want to ask of you, is there any chance that I could get you to unmute yourself or to at least interact when I'm asking questions? If you can't respond out loud, can you drop responses in the chat? Just to kind of open that up, I would love to kind of engage and just talk through this all more than facilitating or presenting it, just as a heads up. Rolando, I think I remember you from yesterday. I did a session with Cynthia McDermott on finding sheroes and heroes in literature and books. I don't know that I've met the other two of you, Mia and Asian. Awesome, good. But yeah, so today's session is all about learning democracy skills, and you know, you this is the most important conversation in my work right now. For more than 25 years, I've been working with nonprofits and government agencies and K-12 schools across California, across the United States, and even around the world, all focused on student engagement, student voice, meaningful student involvement, and the ways that young people interact with our society and what that means. And more than ever before, we have to have this conversation. Students don't know why they are in school. Right? They've been told from a young age that it's all about money, getting the right job and getting the right money, making money and stacking up money. But the reality is, schools in the United States were supposed to exist. And for more than 200 years, public schools did exist to build democracy. Because democracy is what allows people to make money. Democracy is what allows people to have successful families. Democracy is the key to all of this. And why don't we have more? Why aren't more people invested in? Why do we have 42% of people in this country who don't understand what democracy is? Or at least aren't behaving like that? I think it's because they didn't learn the skills, the knowledge, and the attitudes that they need to have in order to do democracy. And in order to do democracy, we need to teach it. So today we're going to talk about learning democracy skills. What are the actual things that we need to be able to do from a very young age in order to have democracy? On this slide right here, I've got some goals for the workshop. These 4 goals: to identify, learn, explore, and uncover. Identify skills that everyone needs for a democratic society. Learn how to most effectively teach those skills. You're educators. This is it. You're stepping up. Learn how to most effectively teach those skills, where they can be taught, and who can learn them. Explore real-world applications, practical activities, and clear outcomes, and uncover your own essential role. Every one of us in this conversation right now, whether you are a classroom teacher, whether you are a pre-service teacher, whether you are a paraprofessional or a school administrator, somebody who's backing up students, whatever you are, whoever you are, if you're a parent, if you're an aunt or an uncle, if you're a neighbor to young people, you have an essential role in learning democracy skills. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to uncover that. But before I get going, I'd love to hear from you. Please unmute yourselves and share your name, your location, and why you're here today, why you're in this workshop. And if each one of you could do that, that'd be great.
Hi, this is Rolando Cano. I was really interested in in attending this session because I think it's like you highlighted, it's one of these uh, topics that people really don't understand as far as its fundamentals. I know that we get sideswiped by this whole national level election, but we fail to understand how important the local level is because it affects everything. I mean, we have the lowest voter turnout locally, yet it affects us financially in taxation, local tax, schools. We complain about education, but we fail to realize that local government has a lot to do with it in in our taxation when we pay for something in our sales tax, that funding portion of it should be going to schools. I live in Whittier, and it's sad to see that um, state funding comes into the city, but as far as at this local level, very little to nothing goes into the actual educational structure from elementary to junior high to high school. Even colleges, you see cities that tend to support the private colleges, but when it comes to a community college like Rio Hondo, you don't see that partnership. So I think this is one of the sessions that um, we should not just be having today, but we should be having it in every possible opportunity. It should be a foundation in education from elementary to the highest levels. Here I'm actually running for mayor here in Whittier, but I speak to the kids here, and one thing that I realize is the kindergartners, first graders, second graders seem to understand a lot more because it makes more sense to them than adults, which is shocking. But I'm really happy that you guys are having this session.
Awesome. Thank you, Rolando. I appreciate that. How about somebody else? Your name, your location, and why you're here. Just unmute yourself and speak up. Mia,
Hi,
can
my name is Asian A. I'm in LA. I just wanted to like just kind of know more about it and get some more insights on it. Because it's like I said, listening to everybody's experience and everything is kind of different
yeah.
than the next and stuff like that. So I just need more insight on like how to go and how to navigate through what I'm trying to do, in my career and move further, have my future together. But it is some things that like I thought I knew, but it's not. It's a lot. It's a lot more knowledge that I am trying to get.
Thank you, Asian A, and thank you for saying your name. I appreciate that too.
Thank you. No, it's okay. Everybody kind of say it every which way, so it's
I just want to
fine.
make sure it's good. Thank
Okay.
you. It's great to have you here. Mia, can you introduce yourself, your name, your location, and why you're here? Maybe, maybe not. All right, cool. We're gonna roll. Oh, Nicole, I know you're out there too.
I am. Hello, everyone. I am one of the facilitators of Teach for LA, and I think it also speaks to why we put on this conference in general, right? Because not only our country, but education is like constantly evolving, and there's always so many things that you feel like you need to be on top of, creating these spaces where we can explore these kinds of topics that you might not get to explore in an everyday college class or even an everyday classroom is super important. So I'm thrilled that you guys are here. It's not so much about, the reach in terms of like numbers. I think it's about the depth of meaningful interactions. So
That's
carry
right.
on, Adam.
Thank you, Nicole. And plus, Nicole's a mom, so this is democracy. This is some learning right here. And this is the thing: as parents, we're doing this every day. We're either being authoritarian dictators at home, or we're being Democrats who, lowercase d Democrats, who are actively involving the people who we are raising up to do this. Mia dropped her introduction in the chat. Thank you, Mia. Says that my name is Mia and I'm a student from LBCC, hoping to be an elementary school teacher. I want to learn as much as I can to be able to do my best as someone my students look up to and give them the best tools to succeed, especially those whose voices aren't heard enough and need the most help. Mia, thank you for adding that. And it's cool about typing in the chat. Anybody who could type in the chat, that is spectacular, as well as speaking out loud. I just love to hear people's voices, but it's all good. We got this. This session is going to go really fast. And you saw those big aspirational goals that I had. I really would love to just share way too much information with you. But as I go, if you have questions, comments, or concerns, do drop them in the chat or raise your hand on the Zoom or whatever you want to do to get my attention, and just jump right in here. And we can make this as interactive as you all want. But I want to hear this out loud or in the chat, an answer to this question for you personally, you individually. And since there's so few of us, we could just drop it right in there, or again, unmute yourself and share out loud. How have you been engaged in democracy in the past? You personally. I'm not talking about big fancy going and doing things. Rolando, it's awesome that you're running for mayor. You could talk about that, but it's really that a question of engagement doesn't mean showing up. It doesn't mean participating. It means developing a connection within yourself that you keep doing over and over and over again. So how have you personally, in your entire lifetime, whether in your professional or your personal life, how have you been engaged in democracy in the past? Does anybody want to share a thought about that? I'll say really quick, just by way of an example, I'm a non-citizen. I am a Canadian who lives in the United States on a green card. And so I have not been engaged in voting ever in the United States. It's not a thing that I get to do. However, I have been engaged in teaching about this topic for more than 20 years. And honestly, I believe that teaching the skills of democracy is being engaged in democracy. You all get what I'm talking about. You understand that. So anybody else, how have you personally been engaged in democracy in your past?
Excuse me. I want to say, because like I said, I am learning this, because I am a mother of 5. So I'm really trying to teach them too, like how to, I guess, speak for what they know
That's right.
and not hide their feelings, because I grew up doing that,
That's
not
right.
being as vocal as I should about things that I am passionate about or like what I believe in and stuff like that. I just kind of like throw it under the rug.
That's right.
So I am trying to apply better with my children to be able to speak, like if they're not happy with something or they're not, or if they are and they just want support. And I want to be able to like support them in that way, but do it right, and kind of know what I'm actually talking about when I do it, so I'm just not rambling on and stuff like that.
That's great, Agent A. And I'll say I'm a parent of a 21-year-old, and then I live with a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. And all these young people in my life, in my own household, I have taken it upon myself to be their democracy teacher. And it sucks sometimes, right? To be a parent who actually listens to your kids' voices and
Yeah.
honors them, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is because my I have a 11-year-old and a 13-year-old too, and a 5 and a 2, and then I just had a baby, so yeah, I get it.
You get it. You
It's
get
just
it.
like different things that they want, and it's like, okay, I'm trying to be there for everybody. I'm trying to show up, support, and everything that they want or want to stand up for, however.
Right. And nobody's trying to be paternalistic. I mean, this is the whole thing about our role models for this democracy, capital D, like we're in a democracy. Everybody's paternalistic. It's like they're looking down on us and they're trying to what to do and how to do it. But we're not trying to do that with our kids.
No, I don't want to do that with them because that's like I said, that's how I had to be this way and had to be that way, and I don't want to be like that with them. Like I want them to be themselves and be comfortable, like in their skin. So yeah, I agree.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Agent A. Mia says, I haven't actually gotten into democracy much, and I don't know if this counts, but just trying to be an active student on campus, giving feedback, sharing my opinion that can help benefit myself and my peers. Mia, that's on point. I mean, that's exactly what it's about. This is democracy, right? It's not always capital D democracy, putting on a suit and tie and a fancy dress and going into City Hall and giving a testimony. It's not always about it. That's a part of it, but that's not all of it. Sometimes it's giving feedback to professors and faculty and teachers who need to hear it. Whether or not they want to hear it's irrelevant. But that's our responsibility as members of the democracy. So thank you for sharing that, Mia. That's great. Rolando, I'm curious if you can answer this question. How have you been engaged in democracy in your past? Again, you can unmute yourself or drop it in the chat, whatever you'd like. And that's cool if you can. All right, let's keep rolling. So this is as technical as I'm going to get, and I promise. But I wanted to share this little graphic. Why democracy skills? Right? We know the 4 of us and 5 of us with me in this session, we know that democracy is the thing. But why? It's because democracy skills are what leads to democracy. And without democracy, we're not going to have any of the other things. It's going to fall apart. And we're talking about the economy. We're talking about successful lifestyles that are authentic and honest and pure and true to ourselves. We're talking about successful families. That doesn't mean that people have never had these things before. It's that they learned about it and did it on purpose. You can see these building blocks for learning democracy. I have a curriculum. It's called Learning Democracy, a skills-based curriculum. And it's got these 3 elements at the front of it: skills, learning experience, success criteria. And in this case, why democracy skills? The success criteria is successful families, healthy personal life, sustainable living, and other things from there. But that's why democracy skills matter, because they're the foundation for the learning experiences. They're the foundation for the success criteria, whatever they are. If we want students to learn more effectively, we teach more democratically. But take a note right here, and this is for everybody who's here. Learning democracy is not the same as civics class. Learning democracy is not the same as civics class. Now, I know that you all have some opinions, and I'd love to hear what they are. So tell me, what do you think is different between civics class, the way that we might stereotype it or actually have experienced it, and learning democracy? What's different between them? Can you share? You could drop it in the chat or just say it out loud. I'm going to put the prompt up right here. What is the difference between learning democracy and civics class? Anybody want to take that on? You type your answers in the chat or unmute yourself and just speak right up. The way the old school civics class worked is that it was all about learning about voting, or it was learning about political parties, right? Mia says a civics class is more just describing the structure and the rules and the laws of the government. Maybe they got into the ways that they worked. The government does. Like you said, the structure, those activities, the outcomes. Here's where taxes come from. Here's where tax is going. So that's what civics class is about. Mia, what's learning democracy about? What would you say? Or anybody. You could drop it in the chat or just say it out loud. What's learning democracy about? Mia says learning democracy is the principles and values of the people and the reasoning for the beliefs and opinions. So it's not just the how, it's the what. It's the why. It's the belief that makes it all matter. Anybody else got some more thoughts? Asian A, Rolando? Nicola, you could pipe in anytime you want. Learning democracy is not the same as civics class. Any thoughts?
Well, isn't civics class more so I heard you talking about politics, but I mean, we're in a democracy right now, but it doesn't feel like it, right? So I think learning democracy is about learning it no matter like what the country looks like, because theoretically, sure, we're in a democracy, not really. Whereas with civics, it's more of like the history of those things and not necessarily like the real-time application of what the country is looking like. Would that be accurate?
I think it's beautiful. How about anybody else? You think it's accurate? Yeah, I think that's completely on hit. Brenda, Guadalupe, I'd love to hear from either of you. Rolando says it's accurate. It's this real question of where does democracy happen, and do we need to rely on the government for democracy? And what's the outcomes of that when we rely on the government for democracy? It ends up not feeling like it. But if I can have a democratic house in my house where I live with my family, if I can have a democratic neighborhood where me and my neighbors know each other, we relate to each other, we talk to each other, we work out our problems. If I can have a democratic workplace, again, this is not capital D democratic, this is lowercase d democracy. This is how we live it. check out this next slide. How do students learn democracy? So for these years that I've been doing this work, working with K-12 schools, I have found this fixation on the knowledge, right? Or KSAs, the knowledge of democracy being that foundation that they keep focusing on. And that's good and that's right and that's fair, but it's a fixation. Like these people get really into it. And they talk about political parties and they talk about the news and they talk about taxation. But democracy is so much more than that. And so the way that I teach democracy is by focusing on these three parts of the triangle. And if you could picture that triangle, right? One corner is knowledge. And that's what Mia described to us. It's a structure. It's the rules and the laws and the form and the function and the process and the outcomes of government. But it's also, the next corner of that triangle is skills. What are the abilities that people need? What are the capacities that people need in order to feel democracy and to think democracy and to personally live democracy? What are those skills? And then final corner of that triangle then is attitudes. And that's how students learn democracy, is through their attitude. Knowledge, skills, attitudes. That makes up that triangle of democracy. But then when it really comes down to it, democracy is about engagement. I want everybody to take a look at this slide. Take a look at this model that's on the slide. I call it the cycle of engagement. I did an action research project for 5 years for Washington State's Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. I was their first ever student engagement specialist. And in that job, I talked to just about 7,000 high school, middle school, and elementary school students and teachers, all focused on this question of how do we learn democracy? And when I looked at the stories that they shared, when I looked at all the things that came through, I saw this pattern emerge. And the pattern had 5 steps in it. Look at this cycle right here. Here's these 5 steps to become engaged. This is how students learn democracy. The first way they learn democracy is by being listened to and having an opportunity to speak. It could be as simple as just a conversation, you and your kid at home. It could be as complex as a whole school student forum to discuss the climate and culture and feelings at school. It could be as sophisticated as a report where all student opinions and attitudes and beliefs are analyzed. It could be as rudimentary as an online survey. Just click a couple boxes, call it good, but listen to students. The second thing that you do is validate students. If you want students to learn democracy, you validate them. You say, yes, I agree with what you say. And you say, no, I don't agree with what you say. You say, tell me more about what you're saying, but somehow you acknowledge that what they are saying is real. And as adults, one of the things that we forget to do is to validate students, even to validate our own kids. My kid's at the table and she doesn't want to eat dinner. And she says, I don't like this food. It tastes burnt. I'm like, well, that's your dinner. Have a good night. You don't eat that. You don't eat. Is that validating? No, because it doesn't acknowledge that what she says actually means something to her. Even if I disagree with her, she's sharing her truth. And that's how we build democracy. That's how students learn democracy. The third thing we do in this cycle of engagement is authorize students. Look at the root word of authorize. The word is author, to be able to tell your own story. We need to give students permission to tell their own stories, and that's democracy in action. That's how they learn democracy. Sometimes it's formal. It happens through a formal position. Put students on school boards, have students co-teach classes. We give students evaluations and assessments to assess us as teachers. Sometimes it's informal. We just educate them. We teach them about learning, or we teach them about mindsets, or we teach them about outcomes. We teach them about democracy. That's a form of authorizing students. And then we put them to action. You notice that students have to learn in order to, they have to take action in order to learn democracy. That's one of my findings from my study. And then finally, students reflect on what they've done. They reflect on that action, and they apply that reflection back to listening again. That's how students learn democracy. So when you take a look at this cycle of engagement, do you see anything that looks familiar to you? I would love it if anybody here would unmute themselves and share. What do you think about this cycle of engagement? Have you seen it at work? Have you seen it at your school or where you learn? Have you seen it in your own experience? Somebody unmute themselves and reflect with me, please.
This is Rolando. You know what? I have seen something similar to this at the elementary level, like posters that try to encourage support for students, and they like they'll have them join the PTA or just some kind of degree of involvement. But it's not. I usually see that it's not fully practiced because, like you said, when the child is given a platform and they begin to speak, there's always interjections from adults, almost like trying to redirect them, and it kind of it goes against this structure because instead of us being listeners, we want to set our own authority to try to somehow make the speaker feel like um, their position is holds no ground, which is a big problem. I mean, you see it happen to adults. You see it happen to these kids, and one of the things that like my wife and I have done when we volunteered at the school, especially towards the end of the year, um, we work with the teachers, and what we do is we create these awards where we recognize each student for their own uh, um, talent or merit. And I mean, we go from the coolest hair to outspoken to anything that is seen as a negative to some adults because you want a quiet classroom, I guess, but we try to highlight these positions. And my daughter's now in high school, but we were doing this a lot in elementary school. And when I run into some of these kids in out in the grocery store or something, they still remember that. They
That's right.
still say, I have my award still. But and one of the things that like I said is, I understand that in education the business side takes over a lot, but it's really valuable to take a step back and really understand what these posters mean. What
That's right.
like you stated, between democracy and civics, but in democracy, I know we see it as like a political position, but simply by us going to attending a meeting and engaging, regardless of your understanding of the topic or not, that simple engagement makes a difference.
That's right.
Even now, you see a janitor at a school or anywhere cleaning up, and they're in their own world because they're almost like in the shadows. No one really pays attention, but a simple thank you goes a long way. And one thing that I noticed is just we really like I myself, I'm studying to be a teacher, but one of the things that I want to ensure is that I don't forget the value of listening.
That's right. Thank you, Rolando. That's super important. And that perspective that you're sharing gives us some meat, and really shows us this piece. Nicole jumped into the chat, and I hope the rest of you do too. Nicole jumped into the chat and shared her experience. She actually talks about what stops democracy. She said, I've actually seen the opposite of this in my education journey. I wanted this from professors, instead got an "it is what it is" type response. And that's what stops democracy from happening. It is what it is. There is no bigger blow off in schools than telling learners it is what it is. Because basically what it's saying effectively is whatever it is that you think needs to be different doesn't matter. And that my voice is the voice of authority. And then we wonder why people vote for authoritarian dictators. Because they're conditioned by 15, 20 years of school. That's tricky stuff. Mia said in the chat, as former students, there's been only a handful of teachers who actually listen to you and say, I get you, I understand. It's getting slightly better, but the old school teachers still have that I'm the boss and you're not, so deal with it type of attitude, which is harmful to students. It makes them feel unheard and unimportant, and definitely doesn't encourage them to want to learn because they don't feel included in the process. Now take that same idea, Mia, and spread it across society. Because we got schools right there at the heart of this conversation, but we also got home, where moms and dads struggle with, I'm the boss, do as I say, not what I do. You're in my house, you follow my rules. Or we have the store that has the sign on the front that says, no two people under 18 allowed without an adult. What does that mean for democracy? Oh yeah, by the way, we also tell young people that they can't vote until they're 18. Because suddenly, when you're 18, some magical thing happens that allows you to be able to make a judgment in that way. So that lack of inclusion, oh, it goes deep, it goes far. And young people are learning different, but the problem is, I'm gonna let you in on something right now, all of you in this workshop. The problem is that young people are being sold participation, and they're being sold inclusion, and they're being sold involvement. And they think that the only place they can get that is from companies that are selling it to them. Because when I get on Instagram, it feels like it was made just for me. They show me the things that I like. They show me things that I didn't know that I like. I mean, honestly, seriously, I got some backyard chickens, and that's probably all because of Instagram. By the same token, Nike lets me modify, customize, and otherwise manufacture my own shoe. Oh, wait, I don't have to manufacture. I can just order it. I put in my order. I send it away. The shoes show up at my door. Levi's Jeans does the same thing. How many t-shirt companies do the same thing that let you make the clothes that you want to pop? What about our music services where I can set up an entire Spotify station based on the music that I like? Everything's customizable. Everything's personalized, except for schools. Because then when we get to school, ain't nothing personalized, ain't nothing customized. I'm lucky if I have a teacher every day who greets me by name. How do students learn democracy? So let me ask you this. Do you have any experience, you personally, whether you're a pre-service teacher, whether you're a parent, whether you're a classroom teacher, or an old person who's been teaching for 1,000,000 years, do you have any experiences teaching democracy? You personally. Carolina, Guadalupe, Brenda, I would love to hear you three. For the rest of my crew who's been up in here the whole time that I've been talking to, I'd love to hear you. Unmute yourself and just speak up or drop some response in the chat. Do you have any experiences teaching democracy? This could be in school, out of school, anything at all. One of the first times that I realized about teaching democracy, I didn't have any idea that I was involved in it. When I was 14 years old, I took my first job working with young people as a community educator. I had no idea I was involved in it. I just knew that I was getting paid to come and help teach a drama class. I didn't know anything about drama, and the teacher said, if you come here, I'll teach you how. You'll watch me for a few weeks, and then you'll just go figure it out on your own. And that's exactly what I did. I ended up spending 3 summers with this man teaching these drama classes. I didn't associate that with democracy. We were teaching them in the public housing projects in a Midwestern city. And these young people, for the very first time in their lives, had an opportunity to get on the stage and share their voice and project and to take up the whole space in the front of the room. They were young African-American people in a predominantly white city. I was the only white person who was in the room at almost all of these sessions. I was teaching democracy when I was 14 years old. I had no idea. I'm just curious if you've had any of those experiences. I see I got Mia dropped here into the chat. Oh, let me go with Nicole first. Nicole says, my toddler is having a sensory meltdown, but I'll be reading what you're saying. Thank you, Nicole. Think about democracy in your workplaces and the hierarchy that sometimes comes with different positions. Do you feel like you were heard and validated. All right, Mia said, always encouraging people to speak up for themselves. I get it can be hard and we fear what could happen after, but it's so important to use your voice as a tool, because not only can you help yourself, but somebody else. So does anybody have any experiences teaching democracy? Formal or informal, anything at all?
This is Rolando again. There's one thing that I learned from actually my daughter's second grade teacher, when the kids were kind of asking about one of the kids was involved saying that their older sister was running for uh, I think it was president of of their high school, but there was a lot of while the kids were paying attention, some of them were kind of turning around, not focusing. And one thing that this teacher, Mr. Espinal, explained was, which I kind of was taken aback because I never really noticed this, and it's something that it's almost never spoken about. But a lot of democracy, is listening, but it's also nonverbal cues. If you're listening to someone, obviously, you give them your attention, you're focused on them. But one of the things that this teacher pointed out is that, adults do this, kids do this. Sometimes, we're listening, but we automatically grab our phone. You know, we it's almost like non-verbally we're discouraging participation, and that stayed with me. So any time that I've been invited to speak at my daughter's school, or I've run for mayor here 4 times. It's difficult
Mm,
to to be at that level. But when I've been invited to speak, that's one of the first things that I tend to point out: the importance of listening and nonverbal participation. Really focusing on the person and letting them know without saying anything that you're really listening, and that changes the atmosphere in the classroom. So I never understood that until I heard the teacher explaining it, and it's something that's not presented usually because it's not something we consciously think about. But with everything that you're describing, I just thought, you know what? I think it's if anything, it's one of the most valuable lessons to learn is that I know we're calling it democracy, but it's simple participation, having a conversation, and really investing time to focus on someone and showing them, hey, I'm here. Putting your phone down for a couple of minutes is not going to hurt you. And I know, we still automatically do it, but it's a learned process. We learn to grab that phone, and you mentioned that Nike and all these advertisers, they create the illusion that we participate.
that's right.
Same thing goes in government. Same thing goes at LCAP meetings in schools. But the one thing we fail to see is that it's not those situations are not true democracies because, like if you go to a LCAP meeting, you know, they the administration, the business side of it, will put up posters with their options
That's right.
and give you stickers so that you choose from their options. And anytime you're choosing choices created for you, whether it be Nike, whether it be an LCAP meeting, where even in some of these presentations, I've noticed that everyone is allowing um, the participants to really ask and really interject instead of being given pre-selected options, which would
That's
make
right.
it easier for you, I imagine, if you're like, hey, choose from these. That way I know what to talk about. But when you're adaptive and you're really focused, and even if you don't know, that simple engagement matters. But you also have to recognize if you are a participant or if you're just there to placate someone else's, to be placated and choose from someone else's options. Because when you're given pre-selected options, you're not in control. And advertisement spends billions of dollars, has been doing it since the 70s. And I'm 48. I decided to go back into education and become a teacher. I have 15 years experience in engineering, but I really enjoy interacting with people. So that's why I've come back to school. But the one thing that I learned is um, having true options, being in a true situation where the democracy actually exists, uh, is is very difficult to find because most of the time, especially at an outcap meeting, parents got to be aware that when there's a presentation and kids are singing and this awards are being handed out, there's always a break. There's cake, there's punch, but then everyone leaves because they just wanted to showcase something, and then they decide how the money is going to be spent after no one's
That's right.
there.
Yep.
And when you go complain, they tell you, well, you were there, or if you put a sticker on there, hey, you were there, you chose, but did we really choose? So I think it's important. Everything that you've been explaining, I think it's very important and crucial to understand if you're truly at a meeting in a situation where you're actually participating, or
That's
if
right.
you're just there to approve a pre-selected item.
You brought up so many important points, Rolando, and I wish that we had time to get into them all. But the long story short is that tokenism is real, and the illusion of democracy is real. And again that you brought up the cell phone and then brought up Nike. I think it's an important thing to say that among all of the product manufacturers, Apple might be the best at the illusion of democracy. And that whole notion that, oh, you have a choice on all these things on your phone. Yeah, but why do I pick up my phone 24/7? Because the choice was taken from me and it became an addictive behavior because of the way the phone was manufactured and the purpose of it. And it's related to governments and it's related to even school boards and their well-meaningness, but their inability to teach democracy. Now, check this out. Democracy has a lot of different ways that we get to learn it and do it. In this graphic, I'm just trying to show these simple 9 different ways that we can engage in learning about democracy. We can do physical activity to learn about democracy. We can do personal activities to learn about democracy. We can do logical activities, natural, social, visual, musical, verbal, and even more. These learning styles just keep going and going and going. What have you learned from your own experiences teaching democracy? That's an important question, but so is this point. All learners should learn democracy. We've mentioned a little bit about this, and some folks have shared and talked about it. But it's this question of who is learning democracy for? For a long time, we have this notion that democracy in schools was for honors students or high achieving students or even white students or even male students or even straight students. But what we know today is that all learners should learn democracy because all learners are affected by democracy and participate in democracy, whether or not they're conscientious of it. Let's pull the curtains back. It's like Toto in The Wizard of Oz. Run up to that curtain, just pull it back and show that big old head floating up there is just a little white man behind the gauge trying to make things go the way they want to. And we could change that too. And that's why all learners should learn about democracy. Look at this list. What do you see when you look on here? This is an open question. Type your answer into the chat or unmute yourself and share out loud. Again, I would love to hear from Carolina, Guadalupe, Brenda, Mia, of course, Asiani, please, Rolando, please, Nicole, please. But give me some thoughts. What do you see when you look at this graphic? Who should learn about democracy? Especially in our schools, in our classrooms. Any thoughts? Somebody said earlier that democracy can be loud. In a classroom full of neurodiverse learners, you have all these different learning abilities that are interacting simultaneously. It's not just a spectrum, it's an entire rainbow Penelope of differences. But it alludes to the reality that democracy is noisy. It can be. It can also be very quiet, depending on the learner's needs. How else can we bring more learners into learning about democracy? What are some things you've done or seen? What do you think of when you look at this graphic? Anyone? When I was writing my curriculum, I base it on a series of skills, and here I've shared 10 of them. I actually have about 32 different skills that I've identified through learning activities. Take a look at these 10 democracy skills. Can somebody unmute themselves and read them for us, please? Anybody?
I gotcha. I see reflection, critical thinking, sharing voices, planning and evaluation, evaluating, which I'm curious to see what the difference is. Also planning, dialogue, problem solving, problem analysis, and dialogue again.
It's so nice. I got to say it twice. Nicole, what do you see when you read that list? What jumps out aside from the redundancy?
Sharing voices, because I think that's something we strive to do regardless of what field you're in, you know, making sure that there is equal representation, especially for underserved communities. So it's always going to be sharing voices.
That's right. Other folks, what do you see? What do you miss? What do you want to see? Rolando says in the chat, those that encounter struggles for life should. Oh, we're talking about learning. Who should be learning democracy? Those that encounter struggles in life should learn democracy. If everything is going well for you, what do you offer in terms of support for others? When you struggle, you can identify the pitfalls. I think of those that struggle should be part of the democracy, if that makes sense. I'd say it makes a lot of sense. Other thoughts about these democracy skills? Anybody?
I want to say problem solving. You know, being able to come together to solve a problem without thinking like one opinion is more than the other.
Yeah.
Mm.
Talk about that a little bit more, Asiana. How do you see that skill is really relevant to both democracy, like in its big picture, but also like at home? Or
Well, I mean, because you know, problem solving it can be difficult, especially when you're not on the same page, or you think like your opinion is more valid than the next opinion, and then it caused a clash. Like, so just making sure everybody is heard and making sure that, you know, you are open to what they're saying and try to put it into practice instead of just like, no, it's my way, and that's pretty much it. Because like I said, problems, like if you can't solve the problem together, it can get very much out of control, and you don't want that. So yeah, just being able to come together and agree on something where everybody's being heard, and you know, kind of putting everybody's opinion into something. It's always no like right or wrong answer to how to solve a problem. So yeah.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I remember when I first learned about problem solving as a structure, I didn't understand it. I just knew that I did it. And when I learned about it as a structure, as a way that you could do on purpose, suddenly it all changed. It was like, oh, wait a second. I can do this on purpose, and I can bring other people into it, because I knew, and I still know today, some people know how to problem solve in a very specific and direct way, and some people just bump around in the dark like they can't see what's going on, but they still come out with a solution. And then others don't know how to problem solve. And if we teach this as an actual activity, we get closer to what Rolando was saying in terms of not just having the token opportunity, but actually really bringing people into meaningful ways. Other ideas? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I agree. Because some people are more direct than others. And I think sometimes when you're a little bit more direct, you tend to forget like the others that's not. So yeah, that's why I'm like, every voice should kind of be heard. I mean, people just handle things a lot different than the next, but like I said, no, by your opinion is more important than the next opinion.
Thank you. And also, Adriana, I think that kind of alludes back to what Nicole was saying. You know, it's like, it's one thing, and I don't really like the phrase sharing voices now that I see it here. I want it to be broader than that. But it's one thing to listen to people. It's another thing to get people involved in doing the things that change their lives. And I think Rolando was even talking about that to some extent. You know, we can have these kinds of token activities where we're hearing people, but how do they do things? How do they actually make that difference? And it's the difference between saying, what do you think of this? And what do you do with it? And that's why that cycle of engagement has action based right onto it, is that you got to do something instead of just talking about doing something. So thank you all for those thoughts. I appreciate that. What are the assumptions behind the activities you participated with students and without students? So today we've talked a lot about democracy. Now that you've had a chance to reflect on it and think about it a little bit, what are some of the assumptions that you have that are informing your brain right now? What are some of the things that you're believing that are in your head about democracy and learning democracy? Let's just start right there. What do you believe about democracy right now, or assume? I would love anybody to answer that. I put the prompt into the chat so you can see it. I'd love to hear or read anybody answer that prompt. What do you believe or assume about democracy right now? There's no wrong answer. I just want to hear your thoughts.
Adam, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thinking about just the past 100 days, I would say that democracy is a privilege